Hello, my name is Stephen Lester. I'm a board certified psychiatric nurse practitioner. I live here in Southwest Virginia. I've lived in the Central Appalachian region all my life. I've worked in spiritual care, hospice, substance abuse, grief, rehabilitation, and psychiatric services all of my life right here in the mountains of Appalachia. I would like to present to you the subject of chronic stress in Appalachia, possible sources and symptoms and treatments. In my practice, among the top concerns given to me is I'm under so much stress. Of course, this complaint is not unique to this area. Everyone struggles with stress. However, there are some unique qualities to stress in our current culture, and particularly to the people of Appalachia. So, what are some of the unique areas of stress the Appalachian people are exposed to? One of the most obvious areas, poverty and chronic disease. In terms of poverty, the region is above the national average at 14.3%. According to the Appalachian Regional Commission, Appalachia's median household income is $64,588 compared to the national average of $78,538. Poverty not only affects physical health outcomes, but mental health outcomes, and is a direct contributor to chronic stress that plagues the region. Research points out that income equality is linearly associated with higher rates of mental illness. One would imagine that depression and anxiety are being impacted due to worrying about food and bills and medical care, etc., and that is true. However, the study does go on to say that there was increased rates of schizophrenia that were related to income equality. It only takes a casual stroll in one of the declining towns in Appalachia to sense a feeling of depression and desperation. Hundreds of towns and regions once thriving are now just surviving. Lack of transportation and geographical limitations and the lack of mental health care also contribute to the growing mental health crisis. In addition to poverty, the region is also marked with chronic pain and illness. The Appalachia Regional Commission again shows a stunning picture of health disparities among those in Appalachia, with higher mortality rates associated with cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. Not surprisingly, health disparities are the greatest in areas of poverty. Now that some unique areas of stress have been pointed out, what is long-term stress and what are the effects of it? Long-term stress can be a result of chronic illness, poverty, or prolonged family situations. Exposure to long-term stress has an impact on our body and brain. The theory is an individual reacts to physical and mental strain that is potentially health threatening by activating interconnected neuroendocrine circuits. This response allows the body to face and deal with the challenge and reestablish homeostatic equilibrium. If the individual perceives a noxious stimulus as too intense or its duration is too long, they may fail coping with it and incur maladaptation. In other words, people are built for stress. The brain and the body have mechanisms to handle short-term stress stimuli very successfully. However, the longer the stressful situation goes on, the more unequipped we are to manage this. As a result, breakdowns can occur. These breakdowns can resemble physical and mental health disorders. Research suggests that chronic stress may cause changes in brain structure that resemble the same changes in people who suffer from clinical depression. Other research shows that chronic stress may cause a state of chronic low-grade inflammation, a possible prelude to various illnesses. Diseases whose development has been linked to both stress and inflammation include cardiovascular dysfunction, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune syndromes, and mental health illnesses such as depression and anxiety disorders. This diagnostic profile looks like 90% of my patient list here in Appalachia. Chronic stress, a generational problem here in Appalachia. Is there an epicenter or an event that sets in motion certain dominoes that have led to chronic stress here in the Appalachian Mountains? Is poverty and disease the cause, or is poverty and disease a symptom of something bigger? I'm not sure there are any definite answers. I would like to posit a theory from Wayne Combs' article, The Pharmaceutical Colonization of Appalachia. He sees a correlation between poverty, pain, and addiction and historical coal communities. The article proposes that a result of the colonization of Appalachia by coal companies has now left in its wake poverty, crumbling infrastructure, and pain. Filling the vacuum now are pharmaceutical companies, opioids, to address the hopelessness of the region highlighted by pain. Many of my substance abuse patients say now they have turned to methamphetamines to help them get off of opioids. Combs goes on to say mining camps became what Ron Lewis called the rural equivalent of the ethnic ghettos, which served as transitional communities for foreign immigrants in the cities. The industrial colonization of Central Appalachia clearly meets the criteria of historical trauma. The nature of the trauma has been chronic and the associated stress nearly consistent. Appalachia is an area that has been largely dependent upon coal for much of its social and economic foundation. Now it is experiencing the crumbling that coal is slowly being removed as a viable economic option. To fill the vacuum of pain and poverty, there are pharmacy companies promising pain relief, opioids. This has now evolved into methamphetamines. What is left is a region full of poverty, addiction, stress, uncertainty, and pain. The cycle is generational in nature. The Appalachian area is not the only place that this has happened. In fact, Combs reports the idea here was based from intergenerational transmission of trauma across 3 generations. This was a publication by an Israeli researcher named Rachel Lev Weissel. She posted the idea that trauma can be passed down from generations. Is this what is happening in Appalachia? Science seems to back up this claim. Research shows that some mental health issues can have a genetic component passed down to children. In addition to the genetic component, there are environmental components that are also passed down, predisposing children to mental health issues. Environmental issues such as domestic violence, poverty, maladaptive coping all contribute to mental health outcomes. We've seen time and again in studies of families that anxiety does run in families. Children of parents who have a diagnosed anxiety disorder can be much as 7 times more likely to develop an anxious disorder themselves. This is a quote from UNC Health Psychiatric Epidemiologist Anna Bauer. Anthony Zanis, UNC Health Psychiatrist, goes on to say, what runs in families is the risk to develop these disorders, and then that risk is combined with an inciting environment. Let's say that a person does have access to treatment. They are placed on medication, given access to therapy. Does this mean the end of the struggle? Oftentimes, this presents a new challenge to the people in our present culture, including Appalachians. So what can we do to address some of the stress in our area? Start by identifying some collective cognitive distortions that can hinder possible treatment, and then we'll move on. Here's a question. Is treatment adherence, which is often slow and methodical, hindered by the instant feel-good culture that predominates today? I would say yes. In fact, there's some biological basis to feel good and to welcome instant gratification. This keeps us in a loop. The theory is that people are wired to respond to instant gratification, to respond quickly to instant rewards. The thought is that our ancestors were hunter and gatherer tribes. As such, they toiled day in and day out to provide food and water. On the rare occasion a treat presents itself in the form of honey or berries, immediately the situation was taken advantage of. In other words, instant gratification or rewards were rare, but they were fully taken advantage of. Decades of research suggest that our brains adapted from a prehistoric world of scarcity and infrequent opportunities. They are therefore wired to prioritize immediate rewards at the cost and to the disregard of rewards that may occur in the future. Fast forward to today. We don't hunt or gather. Literally, everything is at the touch of our fingers. Instant gratification is readily available as opposed to our ancestors. Human impulse is wired to indulge in instant gratification as soon as it is presented. However, unlike the past, instant rewards are abundant. That presents us today with a significant problem. So what's the problem? So here's the problem. There's a trade-off for slow invested progress for the instant reward. This is seen in our economy. There's an article published by the American Scholar. The impact of gratification culture is examined. The article goes on to say this. Under the escalating driver for quick, efficient returns, our whole socioeconomic system is adopting an almost childlike impulsiveness, wholly obsessed with short-term gains and narrow self-interest, becoming increasingly oblivious to long-term consequences. Much of mental health treatment and really life progression in general is not instant. Mental health treatment is often slow and methodical. It's deliberate with a 3 steps forward and a 2 steps back type of progression. Considering today's instant gratification culture, this type of progression is simply unacceptable. Therefore, there's often no adherence to treatment plans. No shows for behavioral health appointments are prevalent, and there's an increasing desire to medicate away difficult situations. Find pleasure in the process. Goals achieved are few and far between. Life's quantity is mostly represented by everyday habits of life. The key to success and joy is to have everyday habits that are of quality and of substance. Mental health conditions are often lifelong conditions, such as certain medical conditions are chronic. Due to the chronic nature, treatment should also be viewed as a chronic or lifelong process. Treatment adherence is maximized by establishing healthy routines and promoting healthy living. Remember, instant gratification is not necessarily the best route. Slow and steady progression, incorporating healthy habits, and consistent lifestyle changes is the way to go. Slow and steady wins. Routines are good, very good. You've heard of the phrase, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, this principle is very true that healthy lifestyle habits are wonderfully preventative. This is true not only medically, but mentally as well. Think about the diabetic with an uncontrolled A1C. The plan of treatment for this person involves several approaches, all of which require long-term adherence. The patient must be compliant with medications such as insulin or oral medications. Secondly, the patient must engage in healthy lifestyle choices with regard to food and physical activity. For the plan of care to be successful and their A1C to be reduced, long-term adherence to the plan of care is vital. Likewise, mental health conditions are not so different. Just like many chronic health issues, such as diabetes, mental health issues are often chronic or long-term. Treating these conditions require consistent adherence to the plan of care to see any significant results. The data suggests that an estimated only 50% of patients stick to their long-term treatment plans. Imagine the results of only half of the percentage of people adhering to their health plans. Decreasing health, comorbid conditions, worsening symptoms, more healthcare burden, less productivity, more family strain, etc. I venture to guess the percentage is of non-compliance is even higher in the mental health field. The inevitable worsening of outcomes present a serious issue. The idea of approaching health and mental health care plans as establishing lasting routines would seek to improve health outcomes through more adherence. The idea is that noncompliance thrives in non-structure. With a structure or a routine, people are more likely to be compliant. Establishing routine is not a passive endeavor. Research suggests, depending on the complexity of the routine, that a routine can be established from 18 to 254 days. Patients will require help and troubleshooting from healthcare staff in this process. The takeaway: adherence to health and mental health treatment plans. Their outcomes are dependent upon consistency. Consistency thrives with routine. By establishing a routine, then health outcomes and mental health outcomes can improve the quality of life. Next intervention is to use what is available. Use what you have. Not everyone can establish with a therapist or a psychiatrist. Behavioral health professionals are very sparse, especially in Appalachia. Travel, cost, and availability of mental health professionals are all obstacles in our area. However, there are some options. Like I said, use what is available. The first option would be churches or any religious institution. They would love to have your company. These communities of faith exist to foster hope and socialization and can help answer life's very difficult issues. There are also online communities that can provide support and fellowship. There are many videos and tools on the internet and YouTube that can be accessed from remote and rural locations that have wonderful content. Use these tools, use these social gatherings, use these communities of faith that are implanted in our community. They are there to help you. Summary: stress is not going away anytime soon. In light of this, it's very important that we can manage stress. Understanding causes of stress, proper insight into management skills is very important. The ideal management of stress is through long-term, consistent effort.